started. And I realized that not only do I have to like dress myself up, I have to dress up my house. Like, you
I
know what I
know.
mean?
Yes. Yes.
Like, oh, is everything
Totally.
okay? Like, let me find a spot where I don't have to, you know, like I don't have to maintain it, and I just know it's always going to look okay. And like, only, you know, back in the day, I would go to shows and have to get ready, you know, fix the hair, you know, get nicely dressed. And now I got to do that for myself and for the environment around me. So it's
So true.
Oh, I heard that's a virtual background. Hi, this is Grazi, everyone. I'm not
Hi,
sure. I
Grazi.
heard that's a, yeah. I heard that there's a company that does virtual backgrounds, like just just like the one you have, like a library, but
right.
it has themes. Like, do you want psychology or mathematics or
Right.
physics or
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just really weird because of the way you move. Sometimes like things get chopped off, and it's just
Mm-hmm.
I tried experimenting with some of those backgrounds. I'm just it just looked too digital for me. You know, it looked very it looked too Max Headroom. You know,
Yep.
if you guys remember Max Headroom,
I remember.
I remember.
So I'm dating myself. I remember that. Yes.
Ah, you're fine.
Those were great days.
I'm
Yeah.
43 years old and I'm embracing it. It's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm over 50 and embracing that too. So
Hey,
it's a blessing actually. So,
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. To age is lovely.
You guys don't look a day over 18. Both of you.
Evan, you're sweet. That's nice. You too. Such a
Thank you
baby
very
face.
much. Well,
Like,
now that
always
we have one of my favorite people in the world that initially, I guess, connected us on the Zoom here, Jen Rink, the city leader of Sofar Sounds Fort Lauderdale, who initially brought Mr. Asia Samson to Sofar Sounds, where I first discovered him December of 2018, and he left an indelible mark on my spoken word radar. We can get going here. So for those of you that have not joined us before, this is AAF CreativeZen, which is a monthly breakfast lecture series, a mini TED Talk held for free every second Friday morning of the month, with support from the American Advertising Federation, local chapter of the Greater Fort Lauderdale and the Palm Beaches. We do this in an effort to connect, engage, and inspire our creative community and our entire community one Friday morning a month by bringing in a notable speaker, entrepreneur, artist, startup founder, yoga, Zen master, somebody that has a thought-provoking, inspiring story that we want to share with our community. Because for those of you that don't know, it was a talk very similar to this, where I had my aha moment that led me down this rabbit hole into the arts and culture world and realm that Andrew and I are in now. So that's why I decided, and Andrew decided, to pay it back and pay it forward by creating and hosting this event and keeping it for free. In the physical sense, we provide coffee and breakfast, hugs and high fives and all that, and we'll get back to that soon. But we definitely wanted to continue the inspiration, because obviously in times like now, I think we obviously all could use a little bit of positivity now more than ever. But you know, there's so many folks that, especially now that they've had so much time to think about what their passions are, you know, what their hobbies are, what they would like their hobbies to be. And as evident by my story, Asia's story, and so many other stories, you know, with a little bit of support, with a little bit of hustle, a little bit of, you know, intuition and passion, you can turn your hobby, passion project, whatever, into a profession, into being a full-time spoken word artist or speaker, or, you know, creative entrepreneur, or however you want to consider it. So that's why we continue to pay it back and pay it forward by bringing you guys amazing speakers, and you're in for a truly amazing speaker today. As I mentioned, we do this with support from our local American Advertising Federation local chapter, and I'm going to have Mr. Jacob Edenfield, tell us a little bit about AAF before we get started here.
Yeah, hi guys, Jacob here. I'm the president of our local AAF chapter, the American Advertising Federation. We serve as the uniting voice for the industry. And one of the things that I wanted to mention today is that we are currently recruiting new board members and new committee members to help us bring programming like this to our communities, to help us communicate with our membership, and to generally reinvest in our community, make it a better, more awesome place to be. I want to say that if you've never thought of yourself as like a bored person, this is a really different board. We're a board, but we're not boring. And we're also welcoming to everyone. I think we need tons of voices and tons of participation. The more we have, the more we can do. So even if you've never considered getting involved in a professional organization, or even if you don't really consider yourself to be in advertising and marketing, we're a pretty open and accepting group, and we would love your participation. So if you're at all interested in learning more, feel free to use the Zoom chat and send me your information and I will follow up with you. Or you can just email me at president@aafsfl.org. That's all I got.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jacob. And I know she's gonna kill me for doing this, but I would like to popcorn to Jen Rink to just tell us a little bit about the Sofar Sounds event and series that she brought to Fort Lauderdale that she hosts, where we initially discovered Asia and what Sofar does for our creative and music community. If you would, Jen.
Thanks, Evan. Sofar Sounds typically hosts secret pop-up music events all over Greater Fort Lauderdale and the Palm Beaches. Obviously, we've had to pause that for a bit now. We really miss being with people one-on-one and in person, but we are a platform that is for established and emerging artists to engage with a listening room. And it's pretty much as simple as that.
Okay.
And thanks for having Asia. We're so excited he's here.
Of course, and actually, I was just thinking about this. So Asia is our third, not only Sofar Sounds artist to share their story at Creative Zen. I guess now he's technically the third poet, spoken word artist, after Darius Daughtry from Art Prevails Project and our dear friend Jairus Evans, aka Quick the Poet. So you're in very good company, Asia, as I'm sure you know those guys, and they've definitely left an indelible mark on our community. So without much further ado, I'm going to just give a proper little intro to him. Asia Samson is a professional spoken word artist from South Florida and has toured over 1,000 colleges all over the country since 2006. He's been seen on HBO Def Poetry Jam, TED Talks, Button Poetry, NPR's Tiny Desk Contest, and Sofar Sounds, amongst many others. He's worked with companies like Disney to write Love on Her Arms, and most recently, Nokia Mobile. He's broken college booking records for the most booked poetry act, garnering him the award of the APCA College Performer of the Year and thrice the APCA Spoken Word Artist of all time. Without much further ado, we bring you Asia Samson of the Asia Project.
Hi, guys. First of all, Jen, I just wanted to say, like, to this day, that Sofar Sounds in Fort Lauderdale was still one of the biggest highs of my career, just because, my gosh, it was just beautiful. And like, everybody, like, that's my perfect setting, right? Like having everybody there. And, you know, I don't much like the whole getting on stage too much and looking down at people. I love being in the midst of people when we're performing, and the environment that you guys provided in Sofar was oh man, it was just a thrill, you know. Yeah. So how do we do this? Like, do we just all talk, or do you want me?
Generally, you share your story, and then thought provoking. You could drop whatever you want to drop in there. And then at the end, we'll open up for question and answer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, my story is really pretty simple. I came here from the Philippines, I believe, in 1984. So it's been a long time. And I was heavily into drawing, heavily into arts. And then one day they had one of those book fairs at school. I don't even know if kids still do that these days, right? But I just remember being so excited about book fairs because you would get the money and then you would go and you shop, whatever. And I remember going to the book fair in school, and I just got drawn to this one book that had these amazing drawings in it, not knowing what poetry was. And it just happened to be Shel Silverstein's When the Sidewalk Ends. And I remember just being so drawn to that book, like, wow, look at these drawings. So I brought it home for the purpose of just looking at the drawings. Obviously, there was poems in there, and I started reading the poems, and I would laugh at the poems that, that accompanied the drawings, and I just started writing poetry. And I remember in 4th grade, I had a crush on a girl, and I'm like, I'm going to write her a poem. And I think that was it, man. I think for a lot of people, love poems. That's your gateway drug into the world of poetry. And I remember writing her a poem, and she showed it off to everyone. And all of my friends, a lot of the guys back then used to make fun of me for writing poems, but I'm like, you know what? Like, if I can make a girl smile, right? And the guys are like, I don't care what you say, I'm going to continue doing poetry. Like, and so it just kind of grew on me, and I started doing poetry a lot. And when I was in college, I had been invited to an open mic, and then that's when I discovered that you can actually perform poems on stage and be dynamic. And so I started doing that. And I remember looking back, I saw my first notebook when I first started doing this, and those poems were like horrible. Like, I look back on it now, but at the time I didn't have what we writers called a voice yet. Right. I was just writing what I thought was cool, what I thought everybody wanted to hear. And, it was good. It just wasn't me. And then in 2006, I was diagnosed with testicular cancer. And that was the first time while I was, recovering, that I started writing a poem that actually came from inside me. And that just set me on this trajectory of writing stories constantly, all the time. So that's where the gist of my poetry career started. And then I started going to open mics, met an agent, and now I tour for a living. That's pretty much the story. Now I just use personal stories to create my poems. It's been tough since COVID, obviously, because as touring artists, we lost a lot of gigs. We lost pretty much our fall tour, our spring tour, all of that is gone. So I'm very thankful for spaces like this where I can come on and just talk to people and all that good stuff. So let's do some poems. I'm gonna take you guys on a little story here. The first one I'll do is I'll do like a 10-minute poem, and then I'll follow that up with another poem, and then I'll do like these 3 poems that I have that's new that a lot of you probably haven't heard yet, and we'll kind of go from there, right? So I'll do the poem, we'll talk about it a little bit and stuff. So, testicular cancer, I went to testicular cancer, and so I was told that for a very long time I would not be able to have children. 2 years after me going through cancer, my wife and I did manage to get pregnant, and we were super excited. I remember my sister got really amped up. She was like, my sister wanted us to have kids more than we wanted to have kids. Like, that's how bad it was. I would go to California, and she would, visit them in California, and she would shove me and my wife into a room, and say, don't come out till you've conceived. I'm like, okay, first of all, that's creepy, right? But for a long time, we were told that we weren't going to be able to have kids. And when we were finally pregnant, she got really excited. And she's like, oh my God, you have to name your kid after a hotel in Vegas. Like, Vegas was her favorite city. And I'm like, first of all, I'm not naming my kid Bellagio, right? And she said, no, but there's cool ones out there like Aria or Caesar. And I'm like, oh yeah, Aria might be cool because of Game of Thrones. Yeah. And when we were like 2 months, 3 months into the pregnancy, I remember my wife and I, we were driving home from a party, and she said, you know, can you hurry home? I need to use the bathroom. And we run home, we get home, she runs to the bathroom, and then, you know, about 5 minutes in, she's like, you need to come in here. And that's kind of where this story picks up. So this is the poem. The shower has been running for over an hour. When I find her, she is sitting cross-legged at the far end of the bathtub, and without looking up, she says, the blood has finally slowed down. These were the first words she's spoken since the hospital. I'm sure she's been waiting to speak until now, at least here, with the water streaming down her face. There's no way for me to tell if she's been crying. She says, remind me tomorrow to cancel the baby registry. What am I supposed to say? I'm supposed to be good with words, but right now there's a bright pink river snaking its way towards the drain, and I can't get my tongue to paddle us upstream back into her womb where we left our happiness yesterday. I read the story of a 12-year-old boy locked for 2 years in the bathroom, the light switch covered with duct tape to keep him from turning on the lights. When they found him, he was too weak to climb out of the bathtub on his own. Before that, I read the story of a 3-year-old child hung upside down and beaten with a frying pan, then left to die on the floor while his parents fucked on the air mattress next to him. Before that, I read the story of a 6-year-old girl who felt the only way to overcome the bullying was to hang herself with a jump rope. A jump rope. At what point did she feel so ignored? She felt the only way to be heard was to turn that jump rope into a cord, tie that cord around her voice, anchor it to the heavens, and play telephone with God. Sweet, sweet girl, if only my wife would have heard you. She would have answered that call. She would have shown you how to use that jump rope properly. It's why I don't tell her these stories of these children born into monsters and afraid to sleep in the dark, because it would only remind her there's a nightlight we bought for the nursery that will never be used. It's even one of those nightlights to light up the ceiling with tiny stars. That night, we slept in each other's arms, our bodies entwined into a figure 8 of infinity, because that's how loud we dialed up the silence. And the only words of comfort I could muster was to tell her we'll just be the best and an uncle to everyone else's kids. Like this was some sort of consolation prize. Sometimes the math just doesn't add up. On one side is a child wanting nothing more than a safe place to sleep. On the other, our parents staring at a crib they will never get to assemble. My God, can you not see this? Can you not do something to close the distance? Or at least tell me what to say to my wife to lift her up? When an empty womb feels so heavy, all she can do is collapse in the corner of our bathtub that Sunday. As I sat in church with my arms crossed, I glanced over to find her on her knees, her surrender telling me that sometimes the only way up is to hit the ground. The whispered prayers will reach heaven further than my screams. And for 2 years she did this, not once getting loud, stacked each prayer on top of the other until it was high enough to pierce the clouds. And finally he answered, his cross appearing in the window of that positive pregnancy test. And now I am bent over the same bathtub I found her years before, giving our 2-year-old son a bath. He splashes water on the floor, laughs when I get angry, and when we finish, when I tell him to put his bath toys away, he kisses each one just before he drops it into the basket. He knows how to love because he is loved. He knows how to love because he is loved. I pray every child could be as lucky. So that was the poem. It's so weird, right? Like, you know, when we perform and like there's no like ultimate feedback right away. Everybody's kind of on mute. But in a way, that's kind of cool also. Yeah.
That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. There it is. Finally, there's an audience. All right.
Stunning, absolutely stunning.
Definitely one of the hardest poems I'd had to write. You know, it was, okay, so we talk about creativity, we talk about art. You know, the thing about what we're going through right now with COVID and with the protests and everything like that, I believe that this is the most important time to listen to artists. If you really want a good, clear view on what the world is thinking, just look no further than art. Right? And I say this because we are in a space right now called Creative Zen, and everybody here is a creative of some sort. Art will be what saves us, right? I mean, it's what will carry us through. And the irony about it is that art is always the first thing to go. Whenever budgets get cut, whenever we look at what is what is an honorable job to have, right? Like arts is the last thing that people think of and the first thing to go. And yet art is the biggest reflection of the human element, right? We are the only species that actually create for the pleasure of just creating, right? Where it doesn't hinder on survival or anything like that. Art is a thing that makes us human. And so I believe that it's right to pay attention to the artist, especially in this time. You know, creativity is one of those things that a lot of people think you just have to wait for. You know, it's not necessarily something you have to wait for. It's something you can cultivate. And one of the things that I love to teach is that if you just train yourself, if you know how, you can actually, you know, summon creativity. So, you know, there's a thing people always say, right? You know, I get writer's block or I get a creative block. What do I do? And I always tell them that there is no such thing as a block. And I say this because, you know, when you're creating art, you're speaking to the world, right? Like when I write a poem, I'm speaking it to the world. If I paint something, I am speaking to the world. I'm showing the world my view. But conversations can never be one-sided, right? You can't just, you know, be the one talking all the time, unlike this Zoom thing that we're doing, right? You can't be the only one talking. So in those times that you think is a block, is actually not a block. It's actually the time for you to listen. Right? It's a time for you to like to stop and listen to what the world is saying. And when it's your turn to talk, believe me, you'll know. If you start to look at blocks like that, right? Suddenly this world of art opens up because now you're engaged when, even if you're not writing or painting or putting something to music right there in that moment, if you're listening and you're being tuned to the world around you, then, you know, you are actively listening and things are going to be filtering in. There's a big difference between that and just being lazy and not wanting to write and not wanting to paint or not wanting to do anything creative. There's a huge difference with active listening versus just, you know, mulling around. That being said, so that leads us into this poem. When my son was born as a poet, I knew I was like, I'm writing a poem for my son. I have to. And no matter how many drafts I did, it just sounded like the most cliche father to son, like love type of thing. And I'm like, this is not the poem. I know this is not the meat of it. There's more to this, right? And so I just listened, watched him, listened to him, you know, kind of just paid attention to his world. And then last year, he started kindergarten and I was changing him for the first day of school. And I noticed as I was changing him, I remember seeing all the spots that he had. I mean, I've always known they were there, but it just was a stark reminder at that time. He has all these cafe au lait spots all over his body. They're tiny, but he has like thousands of them. And the reason why is because he was diagnosed with something called neurofibromatosis. For the most part, it's not dire. It's not something that's going to, you know, really affect him. So we just have to keep an eye on it because he can grow tumors just anywhere. And if it gets really bad, he can get tons of tumors. But so far, he's been doing okay. And there's just some slight learning disabilities here. Couple of, you know, things that he does a little bit differently, ADHD being one, those type of things. But that's when I realized the meat of the poem. And that's where this poem came from. So here it is. Every year, there are roughly 130 million babies and 150 billion stars born in the entire known universe. In a span of 9 years, my wife and I had 3 known miscarriages. All that to say, we spent a lot of time floating in the empty void of space, wondering why the numbers never stacked in our favor. When we finally caught the comet, the geneticist saw the 100 tiny birthmarks that freckled my son's entire body and told us this was a symptom of neurofibromatosis, a rare genetic condition that can cause benign tumors to grow in the brain, spinal cord, and nerves. At its worst, so many tumors can grow, it can sag his skin and make his face look like it's melting. And I'm wondering, how will I handle the tumors if they come? If I can't even stand to look at the birthmarks that are already there, fast forward 4 years. It's his first day of school and he's throwing a tantrum because I'm making him wear a hoodie in this 90-degree weather, but I can't tell him I'm trying to hide the spots. It's just I know too well people's tendency to be cruel, how they like to chop down trees just to make more handles to mount their axe, and I won't let him get whittled down by sharp tongues like that, watching them take from him and turn him into something that he's not until he slowly becomes the weapon that's turning on himself. I know too well that kind of self-hate, and right now I'm just doing my best to control the fate of what's meant to become of my son. So please just put this hoodie on because you can't yet see your birthmarks for what they truly are. But just then, While standing there naked, he held up his arms and said, "Daddy, they look like stars." And pointing to the biggest one on his ribs, he said, "Daddy, this one looks like a spaceship. So forgive me for failing to compose myself when he started making up stories of the spaceship flying through the galaxy that is his body. Have I forgotten how much energy it takes to create a planet? Have I forgotten about the black hole that can suck the life out of an empty room? Have I forgotten about the empty space that was left behind after the first time I dismantled the unused crib in our bedroom? How dare me think I know more about this universe than you do? How dare me forget all the stars that fizzled out before you came shining through? You were born, you are here, riddled with spots as proof you exist. It's why they call them birthmarks to begin with. So how lucky are we that you have more than most, miracle boy? I know one day you might want to eclipse yourself into that hoodie to hide behind the moon as they stare and point. Well, let them stare and point the same way they stare and point at stars in wonder and awe. Remind them they're merely specks of dust in the vastness of your presence. And when the bullies come with their meteor shower of insults aiming to hit you at your core, swing your Milky Way arm to the bridge of their nose so they will always know, that you are the Big Bang your mother and I have been waiting for, you walking constellation, you light speed traveler, you rocket of hope. I've gone on with this metaphor for too long, I know, but every year there are roughly 130 million babies and 150 billion stars born in the entire known universe. All that to say, no matter how worse your condition becomes, we will always love you until infinity. You are our son, our 1 in 150 billion. So that is my newest poem, one of my newer-ish poems. I think I'll probably just share one more with y'all, and then we can go into the question and answer. I love question and answer.
Wait,
like
slow down for 2 seconds. That is so amazing. Let us breathe it in for 1 second. My God,
Okay.
that was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my God.
I literally,
I want you to be my father or my brother, please.
yes,
Gorgeous. Gorgeous.
I'm literally
Words.
crying.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm like wrapped
Yeah.
around right now with Saturn and a galaxy that is stunning.
Oh,
Just
thank you.
the love. I mean, to have that sort of fatherly love come at you is just astounding. I mean, it literally bore into my soul and just like filleted me open. Like, wow, that kind of cool. Thank you.
Especially right now, like to see that kind of love and joy and anguish and pain and ecstasy, like of just joy of life that you've created and you have, like right now, that means so much.
Thank you. Well, number one, I like this better, performing a poem, and then you guys can talk. We can talk about it. I like this format a little better now. It doesn't feel as awkward. Yeah, as parents, right? Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, obviously, I love my son to death, right? But there are just days too where, like, as a parent, you don't know if you're doing right by them, right? You don't know if you are doing the right thing, and that's a perfect example of that. In that, I was trying to hide him because I wanted to protect him from ridicule, right? And it didn't dawn on me that that is the worst thing to do to anybody, because then they become ashamed of it, and suddenly they grow up being ashamed of it, and now they think something's wrong with it, rather than, flaunt it, show it off to everybody, and show it off to them before they even have a chance to make fun of you about it, right? And I should have, that should have been how my response was at first. But I also grew up with a lot of these insecurities myself, because my parents, right, and what they would say to me. And, I grew up with this like stigma of like, oh, I'm skinny, and I remember my parents were like, you need to gain weight, otherwise people are going to push you around in school, rather than, just being in love with who I was. And some of that, but I was projecting my own demons and my own insecurities onto my son, and that's the thing that, yeah. So my son's
his
alive.
nickname Galaxy?
I'm sorry?
You call him Galaxy now as a nickname?
No. No, his name is Eris, and he's man, that boy's a character, man. Let me tell you, this kid is like, the other day he had to do math homework, and he was doing this math homework, and I said, what did he do? What happened? What did he say? Oh, I woke up one day. That's what it was. I woke up one day and I'm like, Eris, what time is it? Because we're trying to teach him how to tell time. And I said, Eris, what time is it? He goes, I don't know. Don't ask me. Ask Alexa. And I'm like, wait, no, I'm asking you because you need to know what time it is. So then he goes, Alexa, what time is it? And then Alexa responds, and then Alexa was like, see, like that. And then he goes, it's 8:33 a.m. Then my son looks at me, he goes, Daddy, it's 8:33 a.m. I'm like, that's not how this works. And I'm like, oh my God. Anyway, that's yeah. So let me do I'll do one more poem, and this is actually my newest one. So I'm actually glad that Jen is here because no one has heard this yet. Well, only people in Zoom here and there who have come on my IG and stuff, but for the most part, this has not even really gone public yet. I'm going to attempt to do my best to do this without reading it anymore. I do have it queued up just in case I mess up. My creative process when it comes to performing poems is always I write it, I put it to memory, and then I always read it first. Within the first few open mics, I will read it to get the feel of it, find out where I need to make edits, all that good stuff. And then what I do after that is I start to put it into memory and I perform it for people. Guaranteed, the first 10 times I perform it without reading, I'm going to screw it up. So I am saying this to you now because you get to see the ugly part of when I screw up a poem, if I do.
But you're in a safe space.
But that's the most beautiful thing though, right? Like people want perfection, right? But sometimes it's when you see the bumps along the way. It's like being in a new relationship when everything like, okay, this is going to sound really off base here, but performing poems, a new poem to me is like getting in a new relationship. And it's like having sex with somebody for the first few times, right? Because you don't know what each other likes. You don't know how it's going to go down, but you get through it anyway. And you like, and then you look back on it, like, you've been in a long relationship where it's become routine, right? Like, it's all right. I already know. But then the first few times is always the most exciting because you're nervous and you're trying to get all the jitters out. And, I think that's the most beautiful part of art sometimes when it's so new that you can't help but kind of fumble your way through it, right? Rather than it becoming so robotic. So this is the poem. It's a new poem. It's called Tell the Tombstone. I will try to do my best to do it from memory. And if not, I have the thing. So after my sister died, my siblings and I had this long, morbid joke about what we would want written on our tombstones. I told them I wanted mine to say, "Thank you for visiting. Now please stop standing on my nuts." Not once, between the laughter and our teeth, did it occur to any of us. We don't write our own tombstones. Now, if the thought of that doesn't scare you, then clearly you haven't thought about the jury responsible for yours, our lovers, our family and friends, or God forbid, our children, because those fuckers have more evidence to judge us than anyone. And you're saying that doesn't scare you to death. Your face doesn't turn ghost at the thought that there are people out there who can see right through you. Relax. No one is paying good money to the chisel to remind us you were kind of a dick. Even the killers are buried and forgotten in unmarked graves. I am not afraid to be forgotten. I am more afraid my grave will be a monument to a man I never actually became. This embellished lie planted above my casket, forever to hang over my head. But had you asked me back then, I would have said, carve me legend. Carve me saddled on my high horse. Carve me all my accolades around the base. Might want to spring for the whole mausoleum to make it all fit, if you know what I'm saying. But I've since racked up too much mileage on this tongue from all the years spent running my mouth. And I've since found out the choir that sings your praises can quickly become the choir that will tear down your pulpit for the materials to build your cross. I know I'm no Jesus. Most times, it's my own God complex that has even my loved ones staring me down with a handful of nails. I'm pretty sure they can't wait to hammer into my ankles if it'll keep me from constantly putting my foot in my mouth. Now, if I can just manage to mortician the ego out. Maybe my open casket won't look so grotesque. We all want to put our best face forward. It's just most times that my best face forward has me turning my back to those responsible for collecting my bones. There's a reason resumes are not carved on tombstones. There's a reason my son can't quote a lick of any of my poems, but will quickly, word for word, recite every one of my bedtime stories that has made him laugh. I remind myself that water where the grass grows, because the worst blow anyone could deliver to a writer like me is a tombstone with something so cliche, like loving husband and father, just to take up the space of having nothing else better to say. Nothing is worse than being forgotten, than being remembered but unforgiven. It's why this poem is now in its 50th revision, rewriting and rewriting until I have a story where I don't end up the bad guy, because sometimes the bad guys are the ones with the best intentions, but became too obsessed trying to control what their tombstone will say. I don't ever want to win this life like that. I would rather be one of the good guys to finish last. I want to be so far back on my final lap that by the time I cross the finish line, the balloons are gone, the music has stopped, the crowd has dispersed, and the only ones left to cheer me on are those who taught me compassion, taught me decency, taught me humility, and just maybe I'll make them proud enough to tell the chisel, to tell the tombstone, he was a good man. Yeah, that's it. As simple as that might be, I just really hope my tombstone says he was a good man. Now please stop standing on his nuts.
Fantastic.
So there you go.
Amazing. Your words take us on such a journey, and I feel like I'm right there with you.
Thank you, Stacey. This is
what a blessing you are. Seriously, your ability is phenomenal.
That poem is basically, you know, I wrote that poem during COVID because I'm thinking about, you know, the fact that I lost shows, like physical shows. I'm doing a lot of virtual shows and physical shows. And I started to think about like what this career really means, right? Like there's people that are dying. There's people that are hurting right now. There are people that are fighting for just equal rights and justice. And, you know, and I'm over here like, oh, when am I going to blow up? You know, when am I going to go viral again or whatever? Like, and, you know, none of that stuff matters. And like, you know, at the end of the day, do I really want to be revered that way? Or would I rather just be revered by the ones that are the closest to me? Right.
Yes.
Did I change their lives? Did, you know, because with fame and all of that, I'm like, you know, I thought about, I'm like, you know, let's say something did happen, right? I'm doing movies, I'm doing one-man shows, I have a Netflix special and all this other stuff that I want, you know, thought I wanted to happen. Could I even handle it? And will my artistry survive it, right? That's the important thing. Will my artistry survive it? Or will I just become somebody that will write things just for the, you know, to be paid for it, you know? There's a thin balance between being able to do what you love, but also not giving up who you are. And, you know, the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know, I really just want to impact the small group of people that give their time to me, right? Rather than we try so hard to impress those that will never care about what we do, right? And that's why that poem is, you know, my sister and I have that saying, water where the grass grows. And that's where that line came from, was that, you know, you got to water where the grass grows, because we don't do that enough, right? Like I could be famous and I could have all these things, but if my son says, man, he was never there whenever I had a recital, and I really didn't live my life right? Or if my wife says I slept alone every night because he was on tour, you know, then that's not the life, right? Yeah. So anyway, we can go into question and answer, and then what I can do is, before we close out, I have one last poem to read for y'all, and I'll save that at the end because I think it's more fitting for what we're going through right now. So if there are, I guess let's do question and answer, right? If you guys want to do that.
Please, yeah.
Yeah.
You can either put your hand up if there's multiple, or feel free to fire away the first question.
Yeah, just go ahead and ask it, or if you don't want to talk, then you can also put it, I guess, in the chat, right?
Yeah. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Who would you say some of your inspirations are as an artist, as a spoken word poet? Who are some of the, aside from Shel Silverstein, which I was glad you mentioned, because I definitely remember from my childhood. Who would you say?
You know, I mean, when it comes to poetry, there are definitely poets that I look up to in this community. There are a ton of poets. I couldn't even name like my top, because this is a community as a whole. I can name like 20 of the best spoken word artists to me that I've enjoyed watching. But my inspiration usually just comes from a lot of things, from books, from movies, from comedians. I watch a lot of stand-up comics, a lot. just because I want to see like how they transition from one to the next, you know, how they transition their bits, how they, you know, use humor at where they drop in punchlines and how they tell stories. Like they're the most amazing storytellers, right? So I watch a lot. I don't ever really consider myself a poet in that sense. I consider myself more of a storyteller who tells stories in poetic form. And so that's what I consider myself to be. Because I've always loved telling stories. And so for me, I'm more storyteller. So a lot of things. I love reading a lot of books. There's a lot of different authors that I've read throughout my career, both fiction and nonfiction. Malcolm Gladwell is someone that I read a lot. That gives me a lot of insight. Twyla Tharp's, I don't have the book here, but Twyla Tharp's The Creative Habit is like a Bible to me. It'll give you all these input on how to like be creative, and it's, oh my God, it's just amazing. I use a lot of her techniques in my creative writing workshop. So yeah, those were and a lot of my inspiration also just comes from watching the world, you know, watching my son, watching my family, how they interact. I watch, you know, the world around me all the time, and that's where these things come from sometimes. So I try not to wait. I don't ever wait for inspiration to hit, right? That's selective hearing to me. I think you just be in tune all the time and it will come. Like it'll be anywhere. You can look around and find a poem to write about every single day if you wanted to, you know.
Hey guys, it's Stacy and I have a quick question.
Sure.
Hey, okay, so for someone who maybe wants to learn how to tell stories better and, you know, to really use their authentic voice, what kind of suggestions do you have?
Well, I actually run workshops on storytelling. I will get together with, you know what I'm going to do? Let's do this, right? Creative Zen, choose 954. We should partner up, because I usually like to partner up with a group. Like I did Lip Service. I partnered up with Lip Service to do one. We should partner up in putting together a 4-hour writing workshop where people can come in via Zoom, a private link. We could, you know, we would charge people to watch the workshop, and then I would go for a 4-hour stint on creative writing and how to write a story. You have a group of people, followers there, that if they want to jump in, we can create a Zoom meeting. We'll do a workshop together, and by the end of it, you will have written your first spoken word poem, and then you can take it from there, however you want. But
fantastic. That's a great idea.
I give all my techniques. I show you all the puppet strings, and once you see the puppet strings, you will listen to my poems and be like, I see it. It's easy.
It seems to flow so naturally from you, like a true gift, you know, so it would just be lovely to, you know, find out some of those ins and outs and helpful hints. Yeah, I'm totally about that.
You can learn
count me in.
You can learn it. It's easy. It's fun too. I did one with the Alabama Poetry Society, the same one 2 weeks ago. And it was such a blast. It was such a blast. And everybody was on here. I could see them, they could see me, and then, you know, they could read, they could share their poems, whatever they're writing. It's a blast. So I'm down.
Cool.
We're definitely open to that for sure. And Andrew and myself have discussed creating more platforms, and we do a lot of events, you know, pre-COVID and post-COVID. So we would like to have some more spoken word events and platforms for artists in the community to be highlighted for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
up to how long do you guys have this event going on for?
Generally about an hour till 10. We try to, you know, be respectful of people's time with work and stuff, but you know, people could stay on if they'd like. So we have some more time for question and answer if anybody else has anything else they want to ask.
Yeah, let's do like 7 more minutes of just, you know, talking and question and answer, and then and then after that I'll close out with the last poem. That'll be pretty cool. I think that's a good time to do that. Yeah. No one has questions.
Vicky?
I don't have any questions. I'm just blown away.
It takes a lot to blow you away.
Hey, garnering here again. I follow your composite photography page that I absolutely love. And I'm just curious if you're self-taught and what led to that interest.
So I've always been, like I said, art's always been a big part of my life. I was more into visual arts before literary art. You know, so when I was a kid, I remember wanting to always do photography somehow. And in the 80s, they came out with this thing called the Cool Cam. I don't know if any of you remember what a Cool Cam was. It was basically,
I do.
yeah, yeah. It was basically a Polaroid. That's all it was. Polaroid camera that was marketed for kids. Made me fall in love with photography too. So I do a lot of, okay, good thing you asked that, because, you know, I do leather work as a hobby. I do photography, and I went to school for photography and graphic design, which is a funny thing. I actually went to school for photography and graphic design at the Art Institute, graduated, got a job as a graphic designer, then moved up to be an art director with a PR firm in Boca. And then I started going to poetry open mics, found an agent, and then I started getting shows, started getting college gigs. At one point in 2006, I believe I had like 70 shows in 1 year that I'm like, yeah, I don't have enough vacation days for this, right? So that's when I was like, all right, I can take the leap now. And then I decided to take a leap, left the job, and then I started touring poetry full time. But graphic design, photography, and stuff like that is actually what I went to school for. So that's why you see all those. And people always ask, well, you know, why do you do why would you do photography versus a poem? Or do you write a poem or short story, or do you write a novel? I always, whatever it is I want to express, I always just find the best. Like I said, I'm a storyteller first. And whatever medium it takes for me to tell that story, that's how I will tell it, right?
Mhm.
Sometimes not everything is meant to be a poem, right? Sometimes not everything is meant to be a photograph. Sometimes you could put up a photograph and they'll tell you way more than a poem ever could, right? So I always just try to find the best way to tell that particular story, and that's how I go about it. So yeah, so that's how I know photography and all that stuff. I do too much. I think I do way too much. So right now I'm actually working on a book called Lux Eterna, which is Latin for light eternal, which is going to be a composition of my photography with an accompanying poem with each one. And I want it to be like a coffee table style book. So if anybody knows people who can print coffee table style hard books, let me know, because I can't seem to find any, at least not for decently priced, you know. But yeah.
I have a question. Going back to your the workshop offer, in my mind, I was assuming too, because I like to write, but I also want to learn how to do podcasts. And I'm thinking this would be a good way to, even though it's not teaching podcasts, but to find my words, and that I think it would help with that goal.
Yeah, for sure. I am trying to do a the whole thing about what I teach is basically the structure of storytelling and how to make it your own, right? I discuss a lot of stuff in there about how to really take your writing to that level of telling stories, right? It can work for however you want to tell. It's basically just the fundamentals of storytelling, whether that's in writing or whether that's in podcast, right? Yeah. So speaking of podcasts, so we're not doing, so I just want to let you guys know, Father's Day, me and 4 other poets are doing an event online called Daddy Issues. It's going to be hilarious because it's 5 guys who are fathers, and we're going to tell dad jokes. We're going to do poems, but we're also going to talk about the fundamental challenges that we face as fathers, you know, like the things that we teach our children, or the things that, what it feels like to be a father figure to someone, right? Especially when we kind of live in a world where divorce rate is 50%, and there's so many missing fathers or missing parents out there, they're not in their kids' lives. What does it feel for us as fathers, and how we are relating to our children? It's going to be really fun. It's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern time via Facebook. You can follow my Facebook, Asia Samson, and you can follow it, and you will be able to get all the information that you need. But we're hoping that after that show, we can launch some sort of podcast called Daddy Issues. after that to kind of continue the conversation. So we would love to see you guys join. It's going to be a really fun time, and we have a ton of dad jokes lined up, ready to go. You're gonna groan a lot.
Great.
Oh God. Okay.
Got one last quick question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Could you tell us about the Def Poetry experience and what that was like?
So, you know, when I was still working in graphic design, I was an art director. I had a roommate at the time who is my best friend, and I remember coming home one day after work, and he goes, "Yo, have you seen this show?" And he was watching HBO Def Poetry season 1 on TV. And so I sat there for a minute and I watched it, and I'm going, oh my God, that's crazy. Like, I go to the poetry open mics as a hobby right now. I didn't realize this was a thing, you know? And so I remember watching the show going, oh my God. And I started having these fantasies of what I would do if I ever got on that show, and how I would, you know, how I would flex, you know, myself on stage and things like that. And then, you know, I just started doing poetry and ended up getting an agent and started doing shows. And then 2006, same year, I get a phone call. They're like, we'd love for you to come in and do Def Poetry. And man, you should have seen how like excited I was. Like, wait, what? And I'm just like going crazy in my living room. So I call my wife. I tell her, you know, I'm going to make it on Def Jam. And then that summer I flew to New York, and I stepped out on that stage, man. And there were I messed up the very first poem that I'm glad they didn't air that one, but I messed up the first poem because I was just so taken aback by standing on this stage that I've watched on TV so many times. So it's one of those like, oh my God, now I'm on the other side of the camera. And that was just, it was life-changing for me, I think. And I wish they still had, well, they have shows like that now, but they don't really do so well, you know? So in like, in these random channels, you know, and they never show it on like major channels like this. So I'm really, really hoping that something like that will come along, but I'm trying to get.
Did we lose? I think we lost him. It dropped off. Well, I'm sure he'll pick back up and give us one last piece of greatness. And for those of you that don't know about Def Poetry, you can find it on YouTube. There he is. He's back. All right, we got you.
Oh, that wasn't me then, was it? Was that me?
All good. It's
Oh.
Zoom. It's Zoom.
Oh, okay. I'm like, did I cut off somewhere? Did I do that? Did my internet go off or something?
It did for a minute, but yeah, it's all good.
Okay. So yeah. Where was I? I guess that was
Just wish there was more platforms like that for artists.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing too. Like, so that's the other thing with the changes now is that, you know, we're doing all these Zoom meetings, people get cut off while they're trying to perform or talk. And so I miss just, you know, yeah, this is a good alternative for all of us that we can do this, but you know, this should lead me to my last poem. This is good.
Perfect.
I like doing this stuff. I like doing Zooms. You know, what's good about it is that you can read.
I think we cut off. Yeah, I think it cut off again, guys. Hang tight 1 sec. We'll give him a minute to reboot. Technical. Hmm. Oh, there he is. Okay.
Okay, so you guys see me?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Back
So
up.
you know what it is? I just looked over there at my modem. We had, I don't know if you guys remember, but we had a tropical storm come through here, come through the Gulf, like last week. So our internet's been in and out. So I know that was me. So I'm just gonna go off of my phone right now, and go off my cell data because our Wi-Fi has been really wonky, ever since that storm hit. So you're all from Florida, you should know. All right, so yeah, so what I was saying was, I hate the fact that, like, I hate that we're doing Zooms all the time, and I hate that I love it because I can perform anywhere in the country without ever having to leave my house, but it also misses that human connection. And now that we look back on it, we look at life before COVID, we're like, we never fully took advantage of being around people, and now that that is gone, it's like, well, it's gone. And we wish we would have taken more advantage. So I'm just going to close out with this poem that I wrote in the midst of COVID, for all of us who are, struggling with trying to do all this stuff online, and struggling with not being able to leave the house and things like that, to hopefully just give you a little bit more of hope. The poem is called Once More, and here it is. How long has it been? The isolation, the closing in. Would you say days, weeks, maybe months? What if I told you our numbers have been off by a long shot? Because I can't remember the last time I didn't catch us all looking down. How long has it been now? We, staring at the screens, divided always by glass. What if I told you this is not the first time we started wearing masks, our lives so heavily filtered, as if revealing our true selves is a virus we dare not catch? My God, we have gotten so good at being detached, planning for tomorrows and the tomorrows after that. Social distancing is a concept we have always known. We just called it by a different name, called it work, called it busyness, called it not enough hours in the day. What if I told you this is not the first time we have sheltered in place, on the street, on the plane, on the subway, noise canceling headphones pressed so deep into our ears? But now I wonder, what good is noise canceling when the streets are quiet? So many moments squandered like breath. So many memories that never became, taken from us like a gift we never deserved. How much have we missed? The times we could have shook hands or hugged or kissed. Let us always remember this. When the shelves of the grocery store were as empty as our hearts, when the loneliness closed in like the house we are forced to stay, let us always remember this. These days, when the tomorrows come and we have nowhere to be, these days, when the steps felt heavy, the walk up the driveway to drop off groceries at our parents' front porch, watching them wave goodbye from behind that window, let us always remember this. So when the gates reopen, we can burst through the door like the last day of school, run quickly to those people, our arms reaching past that 6 feet gap, and make a promise to never let go. I know I can't wait for the day I can see you all once more, to cherish every step I take towards the microphone and feel your love more presently than I've ever felt it before. Once more, to the poets, to the performers, dreaming of the open road, yearning to again fill theaters with laughter. Once more, to the teachers, to the poets, what to running their hands along the empty desks, the chalk dust settling for far too long now to the students, trying so hard to get through this somehow, wishing they spent more times looking up from their books, once more to the restaurants, to the cooks, sobbing in their empty kitchens, waiting for the day to set the tables again, once more to the hospitals and first responders, working the shifts that won't seem to end, the weariness of healing us from a distance, hidden behind their masks. But I promise, with all that I have, we will be back. We will remove those masks and show the world our smiles. We will reach out and beg to stay in that embrace for a little while. We will be back, stepping out from behind that glass, and we will cry and we will laugh once more, once more, once more. That's it. Thank you guys so much, man.
Well, hey, man, where can they find you on social media, or if they want to get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm everywhere. Just look for the Asia Project. That's THEASIA Project. That's not the Asian Project. If you go to theasianproject.com, it's a website that sells bowls and noodles. That's not me. I'm not kidding. It is. And I don't want you to just go on there and be like, oh, that's his hustle. No, that's not. TheAsiaProject.com is my website. From there, it'll lead you to all of our social media links. It'll lead you to our online store. It'll all my events, all that stuff. So go to theasiaproject.com and you'll get all the information that you need.
Awesome. We really appreciate it. You're very right. We need the human face-to-face interaction and connection now more than ever. But in light of not being able to sit together to experience this Creative Zen, we really appreciate you taking the time virtually, and we look forward to resuming these in person in the future. If it's next month, the month after that, or the month after that, we'll definitely share the workshop as it becomes available, and we'll share the Daddy Issues Father's Day event as well, and subsequent podcasts. And you can find these talks every second Friday morning of the month for free. AAF Creative Zen. If you have any questions about the Advertising Federation, feel free to reach out to Jacob or AAF Greater South Florida. And one thing that popped up that I would just like to leave with, that Andrew and I preach all the time, is that art is one of the best problem solvers of all time. And by putting artistry out there, if it's spoken word, if it's visual arts, if it's writing on shoes, positive affirmations and messages, if it's taking artography like Stacy does, and we have so many talented artists on this call, definitely please put your artistry out into the universe. You never know whose life it could change, or whose situation it could help. And we're glad to continue doing that, and appreciate you sharing your artistry with us this morning, Asia.
Thank you guys so much. This was fun. This is amazing. It's a good way to wake up. Start the day off.
Your gift.
Yeah.
And follow Sofar Sounds so you can find out more artists like Asia, Darius, Quick the Poet, Bird. Bird was another great poet, first installment. So yes, thank you guys so much. And
I just want.
Thank you.
Let me just say one thing real quick, if I can. I want to ask this, Jen. The very first live Sofar Sounds that you can do again, you let me know. I would love to be there. It's been 2 years.
Woohoo!
I'm in. You just let me know. I'll be there.
I'll be there.
Can't wait.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Can't wait. If you have any questions for us, you feel free to reach out at Choose954. I'm Evan Snow at EvanSnow13. Evan at choose954.com, 0 empty spaces, 1,000 mermaids, Art Fort Lauderdale, all that good stuff. And we'll see you guys next month. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, you guys. Great to see you.
Likewise.